It's time for this week's episode of Brandon Sports Talk, featuring in-depth interviews from those who are trending in the world of athletics. And now, here's the host of Brandon Sports Talk, Brandon Pate.
Welcome back to Brandon Sports Talk. In today's episode, I have the privilege and honor to interview the Canada bobsledder Olympian Alysia Rising. How are you doing today?
Hey, I'm good, Brandon. How are you?
I'm doing good. Can you talk about how you knew that you wanted to get started in the sport of bobsledding?
Yeah, for sure. I'm just gonna start by saying it's actually Alicia. So I gotta start clear the air, but that's a really common misconception because everyone calls me like Alysia or Alyssa because my name actually doesn't look like it spells Alicia, but start with that. But I wanted to get started in the sport of bobsled. Um, Basically because I wasn't really ready to move on with my life yet. I was a basketball and track and field athlete in university, and I graduated. I took a year off. I applied to a master's program. I didn't get in. So I was kind of like, okay, now what? And I knew about the sport of bobsled because I previously had been recruited for it back in my third year. And as much as I wasn't interested at all in it at that time, it had planted the seed of something that I could do to kind of continue my athletic career. So um, I had watched the opening ceremonies of the London Olympic Games, and I just remember seeing all the athletes walk in and that look of pride on their faces, and it just resonated with me. I really wanted to feel like that. So I immediately called down to Calgary in the July of 2012 and said, how do I get started?
What was it like getting started first in bobsledding?
It was very confusing. There was no direct pathway. There was no one seemed to have a lot of answers about like what you do and how you make a team and how you can move from a provincial program to a national development program to a Olympic program. There seemed to be no um, communication between the levels, which is something I'm working on to change now because I feel like it's still like that. But um, it and it was just a matter of like the first time I went down, they sent me down with a brand new pilot, and it was I remember we hit every single wall, and I got to the bottom. I had a huge smile on my face, and they looked at me and they said, "If you thought that run was fun, this is the right sport for you."
Of course, what was that moment like the first time you went down down the bobsled?
It nerve-wracking, exhilarating, but also like so exciting at the same time. I've always been a little bit of an adrenaline junkie and a speed demon, so um, the idea of just being like literally pushed down an icy chute with a someone who doesn't know how to drive was like, okay, I guess we're doing this, and um, the wind going like through your helmet and like whistling and it was just exhilarating. So I loved it.
Of course, how was that first time watching the Olympics on TV helped you to inspire you to one day become a bobsledder?
It's so important because I think most kids have that Olympic dream from the time they're pretty little or they're in a sport that's maybe an Olympic focused sport. I never had that. I like for me growing up, my goal, the Olympics never even were in the foresight because I always was just my goal was to get an academic scholarship so I could pay for my education in university, and that was it. And then when you don't allow yourself to kind of dream past a certain point and what that could look like, then it's actually really depressing because it's you don't have something to look forward to and strive to. And so when I was watching those opening ceremonies, and I just something resonated with me about seeing those athletes in the parade, and I was like, why have I never dreamed to be an Olympian? um And at that point, the ship had sailed for basketball. I was long done, and to be honest, I never would have made an Olympic team from that sport as well. So, knowing your strengths and just allowing yourself to find inspiration anywhere.
How is it like the first time you made the US? I'm sorry. How is it like the first time you made the Canada bobsledding team?
It was it wasn't as great as I thought it was going to be. I remember the year that I had the chance to move from the provincial level to the national development level, and I got to trade in my Team Alberta jacket for a Team Canada jacket. I was just so excited. I thought, this is it. Like I'm taking the right steps. I'm on the right trajectory to becoming an Olympian, and then the first 3 weeks of that season nearly killed me. We went, instead of going down the track 2 or 3 times a day, we were going down 4 or 5, 6, 7, sometimes 8 times a day, every day, 6 days a week. I was at the track for over 12 hours, plus trying to train on that. I lost 20 pounds in less than 3 months. It was really, really intense. And I was thinking, ooh, if this is what it takes, I don't know if I'm cut out for it. But looking back on that time, it's one of the things I'm most grateful for that I did in my career.
Of course, during that time, what was your inspiration during that time of training and, as you said, preparing to one day become a bobsledder?
My inspiration for training, I think at that point there was no inspiration. It was motivation. It was when you're going through a time and you're not liking what you're doing, which I think every athlete, every human being will go through a period of their life where they're doing things because they have to out of necessity and not because it's what they love to do all day every day. um and we were crashing a lot. I had whiplash. Like, I was just so sore. I was so tired. I just remember being like unbelievably tired. um I I mean, I had a hard time forming sentences because my nervous system was so shot. So it was just like a whole new level of being down. And so I'm not gonna say inspiration, but motivation was every single morning before I got out and I went to the track. I had to ask myself, I was like, is what I'm doing today really going to be the thing that's going to help me in my future become an Olympian? And the answer was yes. So that's why I stuck with it, and I tried to put a smile on my face, and I tried to make the most of every day, even though it wasn't very fun.
Of course, what was it like getting first started in the sport of bobsledding, and then what was it like the first time you made the Olympic team?
Oh, it was well, a big difference, because I went from when I first started to every time I went down the track, I didn't know if we were going to flip over or not, to making an Olympic team, which just felt the grind that I had put myself through, the days of eating tuna with spinach for lunch because that's all I could afford. Um, and the days of just being sore and beat up and covered in bruises from head to toe were all worth it, because I got to be one of those people. I got to be one of those people who walked in the opening ceremonies with a smile from ear to ear. It was kind of the pinnacle of that Olympic sport. And then, of course, getting to compete in front of thousands of people at the track in Korea, and then millions of people watching online and at home and waking up at all hours of the day to watch me and send their support. It was really fantastic.
What was that first feeling like when you first made the Olympic team for the first time?
It was utter bliss and pure joy. Just the feeling of accomplishment and getting announced to the Olympic roster. It was really important, and it made me feel like I was on top of the world.
What were some of your favorite memories and moments from your first Olympics and this last Olympics?
Well, I didn't go to the last Olympics. I qualified, but they didn't send me. So, in comparison with stories, the people who went to these last Olympics, I mean, everyone's so grateful and ecstatic to become a true Olympian, but and all they did was go to the track and slide and then go home. There was very little opportunity to spend time with other athletes and move around, being in full lockdown, full mask, having to get temperature checked before every building you walked into. Very, very restricted, and obviously no fans. Being at any of the events was a completely different atmosphere than being in Korea, with the amazing South Korean hospitality, with fans and just the nicest people that were just so accommodating and waving to you and cheering you on. They just, like, the Koreans were notorious. Like, yes, they went absolutely nuts when the Koreans came down, but they were actually so, so supportive of every single person. And they just really made you feel special. So I'm very grateful that the opportunity for the Olympics that I went to, I got the full experience, and I had, 8 of my crew, of my family and my friends that were there that got to experience with me as well.
What was that feeling like going to Korea and competing for Team Canada in the Olympics?
Yeah, it was surreal. We got to go to I went to Korea 3 times in 11 months, which it's a far way to go. And when you land in Korea, you only can really fly into the main city there, Seoul, and then we had to take a 3 to 4.5 hour, I think it just depended on traffic, and traffic there can be pretty brutal. Bus ride to the track, which was pretty far outside the city, and actually on the Bay of Japan. And um it was like, it was weird because it was only 20 minutes away from what was a really, really beautiful beach. So it was a cool experience to getting to go there and experience Korean culture. I actually love Korean food now, which is something I don't think I ever really tried before I even went there. And again, just can't say enough about how amazing the people were.
Of course, how is it like obviously competing for the Cup for the World Cup and also for the Canadian Cup?
Yeah, so it's weird because we went away in the last couple of years, and pandemic related or not, we didn't have any more Canadian championships the last couple of years, which has been a little disappointing. It's always a big race against just your teammates, though. So I can tell you that most World Cup athletes don't really enjoy it. um, but it's a really big deal for development athletes. I remember being a development athlete and then getting the chance to compete against, the top girls, and really being the first time that you get to see how you stack up, and you're going to be behind, but it's like, how far behind? But getting to compete on World Cup is exciting because World Cup is an amazing tour. 8 races a year. The tracks and the order of the tracks changes every year. Sometimes you get to go to new countries, and most of the time you're at the same 3 German tracks, which you come to know and just appreciate for what they are. But you're going to have tons and tons of fans being at the German tracks. So bobsled's a much bigger deal over there than it is here. And we you become family with a lot of the other teams as well, because as much as you're competing against each other on the track, you're really competing against the clock. And all of us have to do the exact same thing, where we travel on Mondays and practice on Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, and we race on Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So and then travel on Monday, and it's the same people picking up and doing the same thing. So you become really good friends with the other countries as well.
Of course, do you have any rituals before you obviously get into the bobsled?
Yes, I do. I think then this goes back to my basketball career, and I think it even goes back to my soccer career when I was a teenager. Is um, left sock, left shoe, right shoe, always. And it's because I always forget which one I start with, so I have to go back and do it, and I always have to wipe my feet off before I put it in. Um, into the boot and into the cleat or whatever, into the spike, whatever I'm wearing. And I always listen to music until about a couple minutes before it's my turn to go upstairs, which means out of the change room. And I want to be upstairs, at ready to go at the top of the track, 2 sleds before it's my turn. So that's about 4 minutes before. So I usually start making my way when the third sled goes before me. I put my helmet on, and then I go to the top, and I just stand there and I toe tap, and I just stay loose, and I try and not think about anything.
Of course, what was that feeling like the first time you got to put on that Canada bobsled suit?
It was amazing. It was surreal. It was something to be so proud of. And um it it's it was my first time being in like full national kit. I mean, I was in this thing called the Center Performance when I was a basketball athlete, and it means I got to kind of come up in the Canadian program and do Canadian workouts on the side as a targeted athlete, but I never made it to any team. past Team Alberta. So it was getting to shine on the maple leaf and tell everyone that I'm part of Team Canada. It was as a huge sports fan, it was a big deal.
How does it feel to have obviously Team Canada bobsled behind your last name along with Olympian?
I mean, it's pretty fantastic. Right now, getting to have OLY, which is the standard three letters of if you're an Olympian, behind my name and on my, and now I move into a professional career. It's pretty. It's a good talking point. So I actually am pretty proud of that to have it behind because I pass my business card out and people are like, "OLY, are you an Olympian?" And you're like, "Yeah," and then you get to talk and it's cool. And I love to talk about bobsled. So I'm always happy when people ask questions.
Of course, what was that feeling like the first time you added the OLY and signed your name with OLY?
It was it again, it was pretty, it was just a moment to be so proud of, and the fact that I get to do that for the rest of my life is pretty cool.
How did it feel the first time you got to put on that Olympic ring from your Olympic journey?
Yeah, that was also a big moment. That was something I was just so proud of, and something I'll cherish forever. I mean, I wear it all the time. Actually, it looks pretty beat up. I might have to get it refinished because I just always have it on. But it's just, again, it's a talking point when people notice it, but it's always something to look down and just remember where you've come from and what you've accomplished.
Of course, what are some of the things that you are doing now in your career to get back to that stage of one day making the Olympics?
I'm not. I have moved on. In February, when I had to keep training until right until the bitter end, which means when my teammates landed in China, and um when they landed and they had to have three negative COVID tests. And they did that, and that meant I was free. It meant they didn't need me anymore. It didn't matter what happened from there on out. So having to train through January, knowing that I wasn't going, but having to train like I was going, um, that was really hard emotionally. And again, it was like a little bit frustrating because I wasn't getting paid either. So once again, just like delaying the rest of my life because of the holes I've digged myself into, being a part of the sport. And I can say that I started looking for jobs in February, right, pretty much from that moment, and then trying to figure out what I was going to do with my career. And it took a couple months, and I really feel like I'm somewhere I belong now, and I get to be back in sport. I'm working for the Canadian Hockey League.
What's that feeling like getting to put on that maple leaf flag?
It was similar to this, to the feeling of pride and being just so grateful for the opportunity, uh as getting to put on, the kit or the race suit or whatever it might be. Anytime you get to pull on your and put that maple leaf on your chest, whether it be a flag or a jacket, it's really a sense of pride and being thankful for.
How is it feeling like obviously getting to meet your fans and having them ask for your autographs and photos?
Yeah, that was a weird feeling. I feel like I'm not famous enough for people to ask for my autograph, but it has happened. And but the one that I totally understand is when I get to go speak in classrooms, and those classrooms that I speak to, they're usually pretty little kids, and I know it means the world to them when I sign their cards and whatever it might be for them. They just get so excited. So, and I remember being those little kids and having, whether it be Olympians or pro athletes, come into our school and speak to us, and how big of a deal it was for me. So it's kind of fun that the world's come full circle and I'm able to give back.
Who are some of the most influential people in your career that have shaped you?
Um, yeah, in my career, for sure, there's been quite a few. Lyndon Rush was my coach kind of right from the get-go when I made um, the national development team, and Helen Upperton. And those two were the reason why I had such a tough year the first year, but it was also the reason why I started winning races. And if you think that's a coincidence, it's no joke. So and then Lyndon went on to be my driver's coach for the rest of my career, and he was the most patient coach, but also the most understanding, empathetic, and the best communicator. So when he told you something, he told you exactly like it was. He wasn't going to be playing games or skirting around an issue. He told you exactly how it was, and sometimes it was a little blunt and offside, but like it led to a really, really positive relationship because I always knew what I was going to get from him. He always knew what he was going to get from me. And it was a really important piece, I think, into why I had the success I had. And to be honest, I think he's the person I have always just felt like I let down because I felt like I could do better for him.
Who are some of the people that you look up to in the sport of bobsledding?
Lyndon for sure, Helen Upperton, who was my coach that year as well. We didn't have the best relationship to start, but she was one of my idols going in, and we really got to a point where it was awesome. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say Dennis Marino, who was he competed back before I knew what bobsled was in the 90s, early 90s, and he was my first coach with Team Alberta. And again, his patience and his ability to communicate was one of the reasons why I was able to have the trajectory that I did.
What was it like, obviously, getting to live out your Olympic dream that you dreamed as a kid?
Hmm. But yeah, you're assuming that I had dreamed it as a kid, but I didn't. It was so weird. Like I was so hyper focused on getting a scholarship, and yes, I got scholarships offers in 4 sports. But I never really thought about the Olympics. I was an Olympic fan. I loved it, but like I always watched the Olympics being like, I'm doing something different. And it wasn't something that I aspired to. So I guess I was still a kid at 22 when I started my Olympic dream and it first came to me. But getting to live it out again after only 5.5 years of setting it as a goal is pretty special.
Of course, for my listeners that don't know about bobsled, what is bobsled?
Hmm, that's a good question. Very important to differentiate. So, bobsled is a sport on an ice track, and in all the tracks around the world, the track is built of concrete and it's sprayed over with water and it's refrigerated, so it becomes ice and it forms a very consistent track. The exception being in St. Moritz, Switzerland, is they wait. You're at the top of the world. It's at the top of a mountain, and they wait until they have enough snow, and then they cut a track out of ice and snow every year. So every year that track is just a little bit different. The corners all go the same direction, but the way it's shaped and the way you drive it is just a little bit different. And that track is pretty incredible. But you go down. So in 2 man bobsled, which is the most common one, not the most famous one. The most famous is the 4 man bobsled. So in 2 man is the women and the men in 2018 both competed in 2 man, and they had since 2002. And that is there's a pilot who pushes from the side of the sled and a brakeman who pushes off the back of the sled. The pilot pushes from the side, jumps in, and starts to drive the sled down. The brakeman pushes from the back, runs about 50 meters, jumps in after the pilot does, and then just holds on. And the brakeman doesn't do anything until the pilot is finished driving the sled and you cross the finish line at the bottom. In 4 man bobsled, and if you've seen Cool Runnings, if you haven't, you need to go see it, the Jamaican bobsled team. So that is the same thing, but the sled is longer and it's heavier, and four men push it. And that has been around since the 60s, if not earlier. And women did not compete in that. They never have. I was the first woman to ever pilot a 4 man sled with a crew of all women in it, and that was in 2015. We tried to get into the Olympics, but unfortunately, there wasn't enough women participating in it. So instead, in 2022, they debuted a brand new sport called monobob, which is a single person bobsled. So the pilot pushes it similar to a brakeman, jumps in, drives it down, and then pulls the brakes when they cross the finish line. So it's a weird little sport. But now the women compete in monobob and 2 man, the men compete in 2 man and 4 man.
Of course, during your career, did you ever compete in Lake Placid, and what was that like if you did compete there?
I did. I've competed in Lake Placid a ton. It's probably the track I have the third most amount of runs in. Um, Lake Placid, New York is notorious for being a crazy, crazy track. It was one of my favorite tracks, and in these last 2 years, it seems like the infrastructure on it is failing a little bit, and the corners are actually getting further apart from each other. So it's gotten rougher and rougher. And I struggled there in my 2-man slide this year. But it's historical, it's old, but it's got some character and it's a lot of fun.
Of course, as you competed in Lake Placid, what was that like? Obviously, getting to compete in Lake Placid and obviously have that magical memory on ice moment.
Well, it's a little different in bobsled than the miracle on ice that happened just down the road from the track, actually, from hockey, if that's what you're referring to. But it's cool. I've been to the rink. I've seen all the memorabilia and got to really kind of relive that miracle on ice kind of story over again. Because obviously, being a hockey fan, that it's important for me to get to share those moments.
What are some of your future plans in your career?
So in my career, I am now the director of sales for the Canadian Hockey League, which with focus on the Western Hockey League. I've just started. I've been there since June. It's now August. So it's been quite the learning curve, having to adjust and understand basically what I do. But it's a great challenge, and I am looking forward to building my clientele and expanding and being good at the next thing. It was nice being good at bobsled, but now I get to be good at the next thing.
What was your transition like from retiring from bobsled and getting into the corporate world and working with Canada Hockey?
Well, I don't work with Canada Hockey, so I have to differentiate myself. I work with the Canadian Hockey League, which is an umbrella term for the Western Hockey League, the Ontario Hockey League, and the QMJHL, Quebec Major Junior Hockey League. So we are kind of the group, and my little brother played in this league, so I'm really familiar with it. And it's the group of 16 to 20-year-olds who are trying to vie for a professional career, or if they don't, they're awarded with a scholarship to a Canadian institution of their choice. So every year they play in the league, they have the opportunity to get their school paid for. And it means a lot to me to work for them because I spent so much time looking for sponsorship for myself as a lonely amateur athlete. Whereas now I get to kind of represent these amateur athletes that I once was at. However, they're much more famous than I am, and they have fans that actually come into the building and follow their team and are loyal and supportive. So it's a little bit different, but it's still the same in that I'm supporting amateur athletics. So it means a lot to me.
What advice would you give those people that are looking to get into the sport of bobsled?
So if you want to get into bobsled, you better be a daredevil because it is not easy on your body and you're going to be spending a lot of time outside. If you think, and again, you're spending that time outside if it's minus 20. If you think you can handle that, then, and you are strong, fast, and powerful, then you need to communicate to your local province, to their federation. So and here in Alberta, we have the Alberta Bobsleigh Federation. BC has a BC Bobsled Federation. And just find it online. Ontario and Quebec have ones as well. If you're in one of the prairie provinces, you're going to have to reach out to either Alberta or BC, probably BC right now. And they'll be able to walk you through step by step kind of how you can get started on pushing the sled, see if you like that. And if you're ready, then you can move on, and we'll send you out to one of the tracks. If you're in Ontario or Quebec, we'll probably send you to Lake Placid because it's only a couple hours away. Like it's a 2-hour drive from Montreal, whereas everywhere else you got to go all the way out to Whistler, which is a little bit tougher to get to and a little more expensive.
What advice would you give those people that are looking to represent the national team, whether it's US or Canada?
I mean, if you want to represent your national team either way, you have to be ready to work and sacrifice everything because there's so many cliches I could say, but if it's what you truly want to do, you will make it happen. And whatever that means, and everybody's going to have such an individual pathway of getting there. There's no right answer, but what you do have to do is fight your way to stay on top. And there's going to be doubters, and there's going to be people who say that they want to limit your potential, and you need to drown all that out, smile, nod, and then keep doing what you're going to do anyway.
What advice would you give those first-time Olympians and even multiple-time Olympians?
Enjoy it. It's a blessing. You never know if you're gonna make it back. Um, it is it's something that you'll always remember, and it's such a big moment. So make sure you take the minute to reflect and really take it all in.
What advice would you give those people that are retiring from the sport and getting into the corporate world?
Um, my advice would be start early. Start when you're still an athlete and you're not even thinking about retirement yet. Start thinking about what retirement's going to look like for you, because if it happens suddenly, that's where the problems come in, and you have this post-sport identity problem and the depression and all that. But if you've started that transition in your brain miles before the time comes that you have to retire, and for me, I started thinking about retirement like 2 years into the sport, not knowing if I was going to make it or not. And I was like, okay, well, if I don't make it and I have to let go, what will that look like? And if I do make it to the Olympics and I keep a career going, but then I'm going to have to go to the corporate world after, what's that? What does that look like? And what do I want to do? Do I want to work for another person? Do I want to be an entrepreneur? Do I want to go back to school? So I had well put in the pieces ahead of time.
That's great advice. Where can my listeners find you at on social media?
My biggest one is Instagram. So at RIZZ Bobsledding.
Thank you again, Alysia Riz, for your interview, and best of luck in your future as you begin this new journey.
All right. Thank you so much, Brandon.
You can find Brandon Sports Talk on Facebook at Brandon Sports Talk, Instagram at Brandon Sports Talk, Twitter at Talk_Brandon, and you can find me on YouTube at Brandon Sports Talk. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you again, Alysia Riz, for your interview, and best of luck in your future.
Thank you so much.
You've been watching Brandon Sports Talk. Please feel free to like, share, and subscribe to Brandon Sports Talk on social media and on YouTube.